About 2 years ago, I happened to be on Facebook. I received a friend connect from an individual, and she had said that she was a childhood friend from Mexicali, where I'm originally from. And I thought, this is interesting, because I learned when I was 13 that I was adopted, and I had for a long time wanted to find out who my family was, but I didn't have a clear understanding of how to even begin to do that, because in Mexico they don't keep the same types of records that we do here in the United States. And it so happened that prior to this request, I had had a conversation with my son about reconnecting with my family and still wanting to search them out. And he kind of had discouraged me from doing that and just said, what's the point? You're in your 50s, you have a family, what would you, what would be the purpose of it, but I still kind of wanted to pursue it. So when I received this request, it kind of piqued my curiosity. And this person was kind of being very mysterious about it, like not wanting to be openly giving any information. So through a series of communications back and forth, I finally asked who her parents were, what the names were. And the picture on Facebook was a child's picture, so it wasn't like I could identify, who it might be. And at the time I was living with my daughter was living with, my adult daughter was living with me as well. And I ran up and said, I think this might be my sister. And I ran to get my birth certificate to look up the names that she had given, because I didn't get my birth certificate until I was in my 40s. So it's not like I knew who my parents' names were off the top of my head, so I needed to go and look at it. And sure enough, the names that she had put on there were our parents' names. So I said, well, this must be my sister. And I shared that with my daughter, and she said, well, why don't you write that? Why don't you say that? I said, but what if we grew up knowing each other as childhood friends, as she stated, and she doesn't know that she's my sister? And before I had even completed that sentence, I received the instant message, I'm your sister. So that led to a series of, obviously, more questions on my part through a series of days. And at 55, I found my family through a lifelong journey, and reconnected with them that May. The initial contact was made in March, and she came out to see me in April, and I went there to Mexicali in May, and I met my family for the first time. So, our journey never ends. It's a continuous path that we're on, and we can't think that just because we're a certain age that God doesn't have a plan for us, or that there's not things ahead for us. My daughter, who I was living with at the time, felt like my story was a very Hallmark kind of story, because she knew, she and I have this kind of bond of, we've gone through a lot of things together, and so she was like, wow, Mom, this is like a Hallmark story, it should be a movie. And my sister in Mexico, they have a show where families seek out families that have been long lost, and she had even she had a photo of me with Santa from when I was I must have been 6 years old, and she took it because she was trying to get them to find me. And so it's neat, so here's my daughter saying, wow, what a Hallmark story. And then within that week, we're going back and forth communicating with each other, and then my sister talks about me being abducted. And so then I tell my kids that, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is even more of a Hallmark story. It's like, so we'll never know the real details behind it. And we've kind of, I don't know what the term is, I forget the term for it. Like when you just say, okay, well, it is what it is. I'm never going to know the real story behind, how I came to come here. So.
Did you ever ask your parents?
My mom, who raised me, was very adamant about never telling me anything. So even when I was told by my grandmother, my adopted grandmother, that I was adopted, my mom was still in complete denial, like, I'm not going to, it's not your business. You don't need to know the details. Kind of like, okay, now you know this. It's against what I would have wished, but I'm not going to tell you anything about it. So, and my father was never to know that I knew. So I was never to discuss it with him or tell him about it. So there's obviously a very dark story behind that too. So, yeah. So, and there were questions when I was growing up, why my last name didn't match my dad's name and stuff like that. But the answers are always, well, in Mexico, my mom was a citizen, my dad was a citizen of the U.S., so I was adopted under her name. My mom always had answers, for questions that I would, the few times that I was allowed to ask questions. So, yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I was sharing with Debbie that my sister is a school teacher and kind of a director in the school, and she had been physically abused for 20 years of her marriage. And when I met her husband, when I went there to meet the family, she actually took me to the house. Her daughter was taking care of her father. He was very sick. And he gave me this hug, like he hadn't, like he knew who I was, right? He gives me this huge hug, and he goes, "You have no idea how this woman, my sister, has searched you and longed for you all of those years, to the point where he knew me because of so much that she had shared to him about her loss of her sister, And so, and every one of the family members had a story like that, about how she had just never given up hope that she would someday be reunited with me. So she said, for whatever reason, the Lord chose us in our 50s to unite us, and I don't know, maybe we would appreciated it more, or I don't know. But we definitely don't take, anything. It was weird to me, though, too, having been an only child for so long. You learn to be by yourself. You learn to have kind of seclusion in a lot of things and not feel like you have to be around people all the time. And she would call me almost daily, and I'd be like, I don't have anything to talk about. It's like, don't worry, we're still going to be sisters. It's almost like she had this fear that if we weren't connected every single day, or maybe she was insecure about our sisterhood, or and I was having challenges with the whole, now having this massive family connecting with me all the time too. It was kind of overwhelming to me, because I was used to not having family, being an only child and not having cousins or siblings or things like that. So it's kind of weird. And she obviously always refers to our mom, and I can't refer to her as my mom. I'll say, well, how's your mom? And she's like, well, she's your mom too. I'm like, that's very difficult for me to say, oh, well, how's our mom? She doesn't know me. I don't know her. So it is what it is.
How is your mother still alive?
My mom was 22 when she had me, so she's young. She's in her 70s. Yeah, she lives with one of my sisters. So, but she's not. It's my sister who connected with me was not raised by our mom either. She was raised by our grandmother, and so she's never really had a really close relationship with her mom either. So.
And have you met your biological mom?
Well, everybody was there when I went to Mexicali to meet the family, except my brothers, because my brothers live in I forget what the city is. It's on the southernmost of Mexico, Baja. What is it? I forget the name of it. Anyways, I haven't met two of my brothers, but everybody else I had. My mom got sick on the day that I was there. She was at the house, and she got really physically sick. And my sisters felt that it was overwhelming to her, and that caused her to get sick. So it's kind of funny because in Mexico, anybody can give somebody a shot. So they gave her a shot. I'm thinking, a shot of what? Like, what would you give somebody a shot of? You know, it's like, what was she sick of that you would give her a shot? Oh, we're going to go give her a shot. I'm thinking, so, yeah, so I've never, it's weird when I go there because my sister has a very weird relationship with Mom. Because my sister is very self-reliant, and she went to school while her kids were little to get herself out of the home that she was living in, and now she's very independent. She has her own house, and so it's almost like they look at her. It's weird. She's almost like the black sheep because she's not doing what everybody else is doing, so she doesn't get along with our mom. Because her mom feels like she should be maybe supporting her. And my sister feels like, well, if you want me to support you, then come live with me. But I'm not going to support you when you're living with another sister. Yeah. So the only conversation that I've had with my mom that was at length was the day that I reconnected with all of my family members. And so we had an incredible amount, both my sister and I had a lot of questions. And I think it was just overwhelming for her. And there was a level of hesitation on her part to discuss a lot of it. She's in her 70s too. There's probably a lot that she's kind of, buried and didn't want to discuss. My mom that raised me was very much about having skeletons in the closet and not sharing anything with me about anything. So that may be cultural, because I talked to another aunt that have mutual. My mom and my aunt are cousins, and the aunt raised my mom, and it was always like, you don't need to know. What are people going to think? And I think that's very much a part of that generation, and I think other ethnic groups also feel like there was a certain level of they didn't want the world knowing their business. And so, and I know I shared this a little, I think, in our retreat. At least in the Mexican culture, there was a huge part of this image of Latinos in the United States and in Los Angeles, in my parents' generation, that they had to give off a certain level of prestige or having it together, and there was a certain level of burying their culture. Like my dad never wanted to speak Spanish, and his family were migrant workers in Arizona, and so there was part of like wanting to reject your culture because the American culture was rejecting it, and so you kind of didn't want to talk about family skeletons or family even to your children. You didn't want to share all the negativity of maybe the culture or the generation that your parents grew up in. They kept it quiet because it gave them a certain level of control that they've overcome or something. I don't know. So it's weird because there's this level of pride that you have about your culture, but then there's this also level of secrecy and submerging the negative stuff, but some kind of, I don't know, confusing messages that you give your kids. For at least in my generation, those mixed messages.